when we hear the words of Jesus saying to us in the middle of all of our troubles, oh, don't let your hearts be troubled. I'm going to prepare a place for you. My Father's house has rooms. This is the home you've always longed for. And you may not know the place, you may not know the way right now, you may not fully understand it, but I'm telling you, it's me, I'm the way. Come with me, I take you where I am. I have a place for you in the future. But here's one of life's deepest troubles. We maybe don't articulate it this way, but we wonder, is there a place for me in the world? We wonder about a physical place. If I fail, is there going to be a place for me? If I struggle, will the door still be open to me? I during the Andover tornado a number of years ago, we happened to be out of town, but I was, or my wife and kids were on the north side of the city, and I was out of town. And I got the message that there was a tornado, and then there was a tornado in Andover. If you hear the words tornado and the place you live, it ended up the tornado went about 300 yards from our house. But I had this fear, like, will my physical place still be there when I get home, or is it going to be gone? Like, we have this trouble. Will there be a place for me? We think about it emotionally. We want there to be an emotional place for me, a place of belonging. There's a thing that people are talking about that I wish people had talked about or known about decades ago, called attachment theory. And the way they describe it is, hey, listen, if you the task of a parent is to hand their kids what is called a secure attachment. I love you. You belong. You matter. You matter to me. I'm proud of you. And you put that on repeat, and you become a secure place to help a kid manage their emotions. And what you do is you hand them a gift about how to go through life, to be securely attached. And if you don't have that, then you struggle, and you might have what's called anxious attachment, or avoidant attachment, or disorganized attachment. In other words, I'm going through life and something happens and I don't know what's happening inside of me, and I feel disjointed from the people around me. How do I do that? Is there an emotional place for me? We want to know, is there an emotional place for me? And then at the hour that my life ends, at the hour of my death, will there be a place for me? I've got a summary word about that longing, this longing to have a place. And the word is home. It's home. We want to know, is there a home that we long for? And I was the son of missionaries and pastors, so I kind of lived a lot of places. Here's a picture of the very first house that I lived in. I was a baby. This is in Bangwe, outside of Lilongwe, Malawi. And as a baby, I was brought home. This was the missionary home on the property that the Church of the Nazarene owned there. And I was brought into this house right here. We visited it a few years ago and took pictures there. But it's the first place I ever lived. And then I added it up this week. And I realized that I lived in 10 homes before I met Andrea, my wife. And that entire time I lived in 10 different homes. She had lived in one. So I was like, okay. And then I counted up, like including places we've lived, and then we would move somewhere, and then we'd live in a rental for a little bit, and we were building a house or finding a house. And so we lived in all these different places. We lived in another 13 homes since we've been married. So I've lived in 23 different places as a home over the course of my life. And I found a couple things that it's just sometimes, and if you've moved, it feels like this. It's just it can feel hard to feel at home. Like you go the first night and you lay down and you know where you lived. You knew when you got up at night, you kind of knew where the bed was, and you knew where the light switch was, and you knew which way it was on which side of the bed you had to get up to go to the bathroom, and then you move somewhere that you're not used to, and you wake up in the middle of the night and it's disorienting. You're like, which way's the bathroom? And then you hit your toe, and then you can't find the light switch, and you go, where am I? And we're so rooted in what's physical around us that when it's gone, our whole sense of self kind of gets disoriented, and we experience it, that kind of loss of place, in a couple of ways. You could think about it like homelessness. If you had no physical home, just imagine if you walked out of here and on your way out, you got met at the door, and it was a police officer, and he said, we've been looking for you, and I've got some bad news. While you were here at church this morning, your house burned all the way to the ground. I know some of you have been through a house fire, but just imagine how you would feel on the inside. You would go, what do you mean? You mean my place is gone. It's why it's psychologically devastating for someone to go through homelessness. It kind of wrecks the person and their sense of self without a place. And there's homelessness, and then there's rootlessness. Homelessness is no physical home, and rootlessness is no emotional home. You feel that you aren't at home in the world, and you wonder, I don't belong here. Is there anybody that's my people that I can connect to? Or the universal experience of an adolescent is to grow up and to go, you don't really feel a home in your body, and you're like, wow, I feel kind of awkward, and we long. We long. It's in us. We long for home. Philosophers and psychologists have this German word. It's kind of untranslatable. It's called Sehnsucht, which just translates to a longing for something I can't quite put my finger on. There's just this sense of, I'm looking for something and I just can't quite get it. I love how C.S. Lewis said it. He said, most people, if they'd really learn to look into their own hearts, would know that they do want, and want acutely, something that cannot be had in this world. There are all sorts of things in this world that offer to give it to you, but they never quite keep their promise. Can you relate? Here's what he says. So if I find in myself a desire which no experience in this world can satisfy, the most probable explanation is that I was made for another world. Like there's a home that we long for, that we can have. Now I want you to notice how Jesus speaks into this longing in John chapter 14. He says, hey, listen, don't let your hearts be troubled. I'm going to prepare a place for you. My Father's house has many rooms. The word there is translated dwelling places. If you're familiar with the King James Version, it was many mansions. Anybody remember that? Like, oh, there's a mansion for me up in glory, right? But it just means a home for you, a place for you physically, a place for you emotionally, a place for you relationally, a true home. It's interesting, isn't it, that when Jesus talks about heaven, which is what he's talking about here, he's not saying you're going to go up into the clouds somewhere. It's home. It's the place you've always known that you were meant for. You struggle to find it here, but you'll realize it fully there. C.S. Lewis, one of my favorite authors, many of you are familiar with this, but he wrote a series of children's stories that are an analogy or an allegory of Christian faith, and the Chronicles of Narnia. And kind of the theme of the books, sort of, is this that Sehnsucht, that this longing, and it's these four kids, and they go through all these adventures, and they go into the wardrobe, and they enter the world of Narnia, and they meet these talking beasts, and Aslan the lion, who's the Christ figure, and then they get to all these books, and they go through all these adventures, and all these things happen, and they wonder if they're going to get back home. That word comes up in the novels over. If they're going to get back home, until you get to my favorite books. It's called The Last Battle, and one of the creatures, when it's all unveiled, that here's the real place that you've been looking for. Here's the real country that you've always wanted. It's one of my favorite quotes. This is what the animal says. I have come home at last. This is my real country. I belong here. This is the land I've been looking for all my life, though I never knew it till now. The reason we loved the old Narnia is that it sometimes looked a little like this. And then he said this, come further up, come further in. Now we're kind of hovering on the subject here. So we got to talk about death for a second, because that's kind of the ultimate trouble, isn't it? You've lost somebody, or you're facing it down yourself, or you're wondering about your mortality, or you're going through a health scare. I often read this text at gravesides. I'll tell you a little story about that at the end. But this is a story. This is a text about death and how to face it. Now, I really appreciate all the medical people in the room, the doctors, nurses, thank you. All the progress that's been made in medicine to prolong human life. But the reality is that just no one's yet quite figured out how to change the death rate. As far as I know, it's still 1 per person. I don't think that's been changed yet. Someone let me know if that's not the case. But you just live longer. I've lived a little bit now. The longer you live, the more you start to see that. You start to go, oh, I lost that friend and lost that relative, and this person died. And you start to say, well, well, how am I going to face that? And I just want to suggest to you that what Jesus is saying here is that if you're a Christian, if you're a follower of Jesus, that you're given a unique benefit, and that if you die, if you're killed, it's actually one of the best things to happen to you. Here's how George Herbert, the poet, said it. He said, "Death used to be an executioner, but the gospel made him just a gardener." What a phrase. What's a gardener do? A gardener takes something and plants it in the ground so that something beautiful comes up. That's what's happening. Dwight Moody, maybe you know who Dwight Moody is. He was a revivalist and evangelist. He started a church in downtown Chicago, still there, the Moody Church, that you can visit. And he said this. He said, "There's a day is going to come when you read in the paper," he was kind of famous in his day, that Dwight L. Moody has died. And he said, "Don't you believe a word of it. I'll be more alive then than I ever was." What death is not, you're not leaving the light of the world and going into the darkness. You're leaving this kind of relative darkness of the world that we live in, full of confusion, trouble continuums, and you're going into the light. So here's how Jesus says it. "If I go and prepare a place for you, I'm going to come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am." Here's what Jesus is saying about the room that he's preparing for you, this place that he's prepared, the home that you want, is that I'm going to be there, Jesus says. God himself will be there, meaning that heaven is about love. Jonathan Edwards wrote, he was a philosopher, a pastor, president of Yale University, if I have that right, at the beginning of Yale University. But he had this wonderful little article, you can look it up and Google it, but where he said, heaven is a world of love. God will be full, you'll experience all of God's love, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit who loved each other from all eternity. You'll be immersed in that love, and you will feel all the love that you've ever wanted to have for another person, and they'll feel it from you. And that everyone that is in heaven, that maybe they didn't quite, you've lost some people, I've lost some people in my life, like they didn't quite get all the nuances of love and how to love, but they're experiencing all of it now because heaven is a world of love. You're with God. That's what makes heaven. It's not so much the physical location as who is there with you. So here's the Christian understanding of death, is that in the face of it, we have a sense of triumph over death. So Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15, he says, "Death, hey, where's your sting? Grave, where is your victory?" Now, I love reading you great quotes, and I'm trying to load you up here today. You're welcome for all of the great quotes I'm giving you. Hope you're taking screenshots. But one of my favorites is John Donne, Holy Sonnet number 10. You may have read it in English, but it's was made into a book by Ernest Hemingway, one of the lines. Here's what he says. He says, "Death, be not proud, though some have called thee mighty and dreadful, for thou art not so." Let's bring back the these and thous. "From rest and sleep, which but thy pictures be, much pleasure then from thee much more must flow, and soonest our best men with thee do go. Rest of their bones and souls delivery. Thou art slave to fate, chance, kings, and desperate men, and dost with poison, war, and sickness dwell. Listen, one short sleep past, we wake eternally, and death shall be no more. Death," this is a Christian statement, "thou shalt die." Do you have that sort of confidence about your own end? What's the way to it? How do you get it? Here's what Jesus says, verse 3. He says, I go to prepare that place for you. Now, you know the context here. What's happening is Jesus is with his disciples, and it's the day before he's going to die. He knows the next day he's going to cross. He's going to go to hell for you to get to heaven. Are you following? I love, I told you about it last week, Athanasius wrote this little teeny book called On the Incarnation. It's wonderful and beautiful and a delight to read. It's a little bit of work to read it, but it's wonderful. And he uses this analogy. He says, just say that like a king comes into a city, and that king decides to stay in a house and dwells in that house. And what happens when that king comes into the city and decides to stay in that house is the king then brings honor to the whole city. And because he brings with him an entourage and protection and soldiers, then enemies and robbers, they stop being able to harm it. And so this is how he says it. He says, even so it is with the king of all. He's talking about Jesus. He has come into our country and dwelt in one body amidst the many. For the human race would have perished utterly had not the Lord and Savior of all, the Son of God, come among us to put an end to death. So here's what's happening. Jesus goes through death in order to prepare a place for you. And it's interesting. Jesus says, hey, and listen, guys, you know the way to the place where I'm going. And I love that Thomas, the doubting disciple, says, no, actually, we don't. And so then Jesus gives this famous phrase, I am the way and the truth and the life. That's a loaded phrase. Here's a little bit of what's happening in that loaded phrase. Every good Jew would have heard that phrase, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and they would have said, you're referencing the Torah, the first 5 books of the Old Testament, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. You're referencing the law that God has given us and gave us through Moses. That's the way, the truth, and the life. What he's saying, you're the way, the truth, and the life. And Jesus says, hey, listen, I appreciate the Torah. I'm for God's law, but that was the guidebook. Now you have the guide. Like, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. And it bears repeating. Talked about it a few times, and we'll talk about it again. But he says, I am. It's this statement from when God gives his name to Moses, and he says to Moses, here's who I am. I am existence itself. I am life itself. I always was, I am, and I always will be. I am. That's me. You need to know the whole range of this. There's 7 statements. I've got the life-changing power of a chart here for you. Here it is. Jesus is saying he's the I am, right? I'm the bread of life. That means Jesus is sustenance. Jesus says I'm the light of the world. That means Jesus is the way to see. Jesus says I'm the door. That means Jesus is the access you need in life. Jesus says I'm the good shepherd. That means he's your guide. Jesus says he's the resurrection and life. It means you can have fresh start and lasting hope. Jesus says, like we're talking about today, the way, the truth, and the life. And that means he's your path. We're going to talk next week about how Jesus is the vine. He's the source of love that you need. Jesus is saying he is everything that you need. And when it all falls apart, the great I am is still there. Are you following? Like, sometimes you get to the place in life and all you have is Jesus, and you have to say, you know what? I found out that's actually all I need. I've got what I need. The great I am is with me through all of this. And then he says, this is so lovely. He says, no one comes to the Father except through me. He's saying it's a statement of how it happens. In other words, it's not by you. You don't make that happen. I wish you could tattoo this on your eyelids so you could see this, or on your heart somehow. Here's what Jesus is saying, that the way is secured for you, not by you. Let me say that to you again. The way is secured for you, not by you. Just imagine if I came to you. Again, we're having this little moment here in the back when you meet the police and found out your house was burned, and then you turn to me. And then I say to you, hey, listen, I know you heard that bad news, but guess what? I went out and I bought first-class tickets for your entire family, and I booked and paid for a beautiful stay in Florence, Italy, and a tour all the way through all of the beautiful cities of Italy, and paid for, here's a gift card with $5,000, Visa gift card with $5,000 on it, and it's just, here it is. I'm offering it to you. It's already bought. It's already paid for. You would go on that trip, and you wouldn't go, you know what I did? I did this trip on my own. This was my doing. You would go, somebody else secured that for me. That's what you would recognize. That's what Jesus is saying. He's like, I secured it for, I paid the way for you. You don't pay the way yourself. So this is not about how well you can do. It's not about you being religious enough. It's not about you making sure you've performed well in life. It's not about you having a solid streak of feeling like you're nailing all the important things and you've spent time with God. This is not by you. It is secured for you. World of difference. When Jesus is saying, I'm the way, the truth, and the life, he's actually bypassing you. And he's saying, it doesn't matter if you even know the way, or you understand the truth, or you're crushing it or not crushing it at life. Doesn't matter, because it's not secured by you, it's secured for you.